and welcome back to a new episode of the Women's Strength Society show. Today with the question, do you need to train to failure to build muscle? And I mean, training to failure or close to failure is a big thing, right? On social media, you hear it everywhere. It's like you need to train close to failure so that your muscles grow. But do you really need to do that? What does it even mean? For those of you who maybe don't know, and we are going to talk about that today.
Yeah, and it's a question that has been popping up quite a lot lately. And the first thing we want to do is, of course, define what it means to train close to failure so that you can really understand what we talk about and also what is talked about on social media. And so training to failure is training to the point where you are physically not able to move the weight up anymore. And so this is not like a sensation or a feeling, or it's like really objective. And this happens because as you are training and taxing your muscle to perform the work, then the muscle is fatiguing, and at some point your body is going to say like, I cannot go anymore. And before this happens, then the movement is going to slow down, even though you're trying as hard as you can to bring the weight up. You put the same effort or maybe even more effort than at the very beginning of the set, yet the weight moves much more slowly. And at some point, it's just going to stop completely. And this is when you reach the point of failure.
The example that I like to use the most is the leg extension.
Yeah.
Or also when someone doesn't know how it feels like, right? What is like hitting real failure on an exercise, then I always like to let that woman sit on a leg extension machine, and with the weight that she has previously performed, try to go as long as she can, and try to get as many reps as she can until she cannot extend her legs anymore, right? Her legs.
Her legs.
What do you say?
Knees. Extend her legs. You can say both.
Okay, extend her legs anymore. So although she is trying to move it up, like nothing is happening. And I think oftentimes, especially when we are like newer to training, or we haven't yet experienced, even though we are maybe a couple of years in the gym, but we have never experienced the feeling, it's a great exercise to do. So just pick a weight that you are maybe currently performing for, 10 to 12 reps, and see, okay, how many reps can I really get when I'm continuing with the exercise, so that you can experience that training to failure is really not a subjective feeling, but it's like objectively measured by the speed of your movement and what your muscle can perform or can't perform.
And the reason we like the leg extension so much is because it's pretty hard to cheat. You are very stable in your seat. There's not a lot of additional movement that you can do to still like bring the weight up, because your body is not thinking about how can I create the most amount of muscle mass, or how can I maximize hypertrophy and improve my gains. Your body is thinking about like survivals and conservation of energy. But training to failure or close to failure is something that's extremely costly in terms of energy. And so what's going to happen is, once you reach that point, then your body is going to try to find some ways to avoid going there. And one of the reasons is to avoid, burning too much energy. But the other one is also to avoid like going in a realm where injury might happen more easily, because your body is going to sense the mechanical friction, the muscle fibers that are really working hard. And there are a lot of mechanisms that are going to signal to your brain that something is happening and it's very intense and there might be some damage, and your body doesn't want to have that. And so what happens is, this is where you start to compensate and move in a different way to avoid recruiting the same muscle fibers that you were using before. And the leg extension, pretty hard to do. If you do like bicep curls, then it's very easy to do. So your arm is going to shift, your elbows are going to go backward, you are going to lean backward, and eventually what happens is you are lifting the weight, not with your biceps, but with your back, or you are using different muscle to finish the task, to perform the movement, but not by using the muscle that you actually want to grow, but by using other muscle. This is something that can happen also very often in a squat, for example.
Yeah.
And instead of using your quads, then your body is going to shift so that you're going to use more of your posterior chain and maybe your lower back. And so this is something that's difficult to do on the leg extension, and that's why we like to use that, especially at the beginning when it comes to developing the skill of training to failure. And so we are going to spoil a bit what we are going to talk about, but you don't have to always train to failure, but having the skill to do that is pretty important, or very important to master if you want to maximize muscle growth.
And I think we talk a lot about the skills in the gym. Like if you want to transform your body, you need to get stronger and build some muscle mass to add some shape to your body. And so the gym is really like pure skill development. And sometimes you cannot cheat that, right? You cannot cheat your way through it. You have to go through it and you have to learn it. Training to failure, training with the given like tempo prescription, understanding the different movement patterns better, understanding the joint actions and like what kind of, I mean, you don't have to go like super deep down the rabbit hole with like biomechanics, but some level of understanding like what's happening when you're doing a lat pull down, right? That you are not wanting your traps to take over and do all the work, or your biceps too much. Of course, they will help. But that you have that feeling for the right muscle and understanding of like, oh, when I'm doing this with my arm, what is actually happening there, or what am I trying to create? And so I think seeing the gym more so as it's not just a thing that you check off your to-do list and you're just getting it done, but there also needs to be some time that you spend actively or consciously becoming better in what you're doing, like bringing really the quality up of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and because of what we just talked about, like the difficulty of getting to failure because your body wants to avoid that, then it's very useful to see that as a skill, because on the leg extension, it's not a skill that's like super complicated to develop, but for more complex movement, even a lat pull down, there's more component, there are different joints that are involved. You don't have as much stability and as much like biosensory feedback from the machine. A leg press, for example, you also have like more joint involved, but it's very difficult to move around in a leg press, right? You are crushed from the weight that comes from above, but you are also like held together from the seat that's behind you. And so you want to learn the skill to train to failure for pretty much all the primary movements that you're going to use to build muscle mass. And there are quite a few of them, right? If you want to have the glutes, then you want to learn how to do that with hip extension. Then if you want quads, you want to learn how to do that with knee extension. Then for the upper body, it's going to be, shoulder extension. If you want to have more like the back shoulder, and of course the lat. If you want to have more the front shoulder and the pec, it's going to be shoulder flexion and so forth and so on. And so there are also a lot of exercises, and you touch also on the tempo. So there are many components that come into it. And if you train to failure, it's not that you are going to just fight your way through the set to really I don't know. We always say like you turn into an overcooked spaghetti to bring the weight up. You want to be able to have the movement quality very much standardized, and on top of that, then you bring that to failure. And where I was going with that, I wanted to say something about the skill and training to failure.
I don't know, because I have another thought.
I know. So where I was going was you want to develop that skill, and the reason it's talked so much about is because training to failure is a very certain way to know that you are going to create mechanical tension. Mechanical tension is seen as one of the most important or the most important trigger for muscle growth. But the thing is, if you train close to failure but you turn into an overcooked spaghetti and the movement quality just goes to shit and you are not really moving anymore, primarily thanks to the muscle that you want to grow, but your body compensates to save energy and to avoid like injuries, then you are creating mechanical tension but not in the muscle that you want to grow. And so I don't know if that was the thought that you had in mind, but to go back to the original question, do you have to train to failure in order to grow muscle? And the answer is already, we can say like no, because training to failure is like going to the point where you are not able to complete the rep. It's not a guarantee. If you don't have like the movement quality that comes with it, then you might grow muscle, but you might definitely not grow the muscle that you want to actually grow and target with that specific movement. So already there, you can see that simply training to failure does not guarantee muscle growth. What was the thought that you had in mind?
The thought that I had in mind is that I have quite a lot of conversations in like my emails, Instagram, with women who are training for a year or maybe 2 years, and they are saying like, "Hey, I'm training to failure. I'm doing progressive overload, but still my body is not changing." And sometimes I'm like, okay, there are a lot of different things we can like tap into and look at like what is going on. And of course, in I would say 99% of the cases, there needs to be a better setup of like matching training and nutrition to make sure that we are getting faster results. I mean, again, we cannot skip physiology, like things will take time, but sometimes someone would train close to failure or whatever and think she's applying progressive overload for 10 years, but she's actually not really doing it. So always when we work with ladies, we can do stuff that is collapsing the time a little bit from what they would do on their own. But when someone tells me she's training for a year and she's training to failure or applying progressive overload, that's almost a guaranteed like red flag for me that she probably is not training with an like really amazing form or high quality of the movements. And then on top of that, knowing how to apply progressive overload correctly. And then on top of that, training close to failure. Like a year is not a long time when we are talking about the skill development when it comes to like training, being in the gym. A year is really not a lot of time. Thinking back of my own journey, I would say I've nailed those things, but I'm also now working since 2019, so that's 7 years with a coach by my side who is like having a look at my training quality and helping me to tweak things, refine things, and develop those skills and find those blind spots in my training to be like, okay, what can we do to make it better, to optimize it, to really squeeze everything out of your training so that we know it's like productive.
And I mean, even before that, when you're training at skills, then there are still coaches leading the sessions and giving feedback on movement. And this is also something that is going to have an impact. Also, and assessing like the intensity, like how close you are to failure and that sort of things. And so if you've never done that, if you've never experienced like working with a coach, if you've never gotten that feedback, and the only thing that you have in mind is just like, I have to push to failure, because that's what you hear all the time from all the people on social media, then it becomes quite easy to actually lose your form as you ramp up the intensity and make it a habit to progress too fast. And this is something that we see so often, is weight progression or rep progression that just happen way too fast. And so what happens is the training execution suffer, and instead of ensuring that the execution is standardized and remains the same from week to week as you apply progressive overload, which is the right thing to do, but as you increase the training load, then you should be able to maintain the same movement quality. And what we see very often is just like, okay, I've increased the weight 5 pounds week on week on week on week for a long time, and then what happens is either there's no control lowering the movement, or the range of motion is decreasing, or other muscles are going to start taking over instead of only using the primary movers.
I think this also comes from the idea that you can apply progressive overload like no matter what. Like you can, because sometimes I have the feeling, what I see out there a lot with women who are lifting consistently in the gym is they have that idea of, I need to add weight because when I'm adding weight, that's progressive overload. But then they're doing that no matter what. And so you need to understand that progressive overload is also something that can happen because you have the quality of movement. You can control the like tempo. You are good in finding the right position and the setup, like every time you're going to the gym, to make it the same, right? We want to make it as close as we can to the last time we did the exact same movement. We want to have the same setup, the same positioning, and not change it. So sometimes I have the feeling progressive overload is used as, oh yeah, I'm doing that. Of course I'm doing that because everyone knows like this is what's needed. But it's also something that happens and is possible to do it the quote unquote right way when you have everything else in place. What I just touched based on. It's not that you can just go for it, and just because you are adding more and more load to the bar, it doesn't mean that you have applied progressive overload correctly.
Yeah. So progressive overload is both like the proof that what the training that you've done in the past has been effective, but it's also the way that you're going to make your training effective. And so it does require a certain level of effort and of pushing yourself and striving to, stretch your limits, but with the constraint that you just talked about, because otherwise, you are not going to have that exact same quality. And there are even some people who talk about using the RP. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 would be like max effort. You can barely finish the rep, but not more. So that would be pretty much training to failure. And then what they want to do is see the numbers increasing in rep and or in weight over time at that same intensity. And sometimes what happens is simply like you applied more effort to the same set, and that's why the weight is going up or the reps are going up, but for the same given effort there hasn't been any change. So let me give you an example. With the leg extension, for example, and you said like, hey, if you use the weight like for 10 to 12 reps for a while, then how hard can you actually push? And then you are going to see that when you push yourself, you might be able to do actually 15 or maybe even 20 reps with that. It's not really that you've applied progressive overload, because the set of 12 or the set of 20 with the same weight is not going to be the same effort. So one is going
Although
to...
it feels the same, right? With the leg extension, it's really tricky because
Yeah.
you do have the burning sensation in your quads. And so that's something that will trick us and be like, oh, this is hard, even with like 12 reps. I think as soon as I'm hitting more than 10 reps on a leg extension, it's just burning. But that doesn't mean that I cannot do 10 more,
more reps.
depending on the weight.
Yeah, exactly. And so one set is going to be an RP of 5, maybe 6, even though it feels like an 8.
Yeah.
But then the other one is going to be a 9.5 maybe. And so same weight, different rep. It's just a different effort. It's not really that you've applied a lot of progressive overload there. And so what you'd want to see is actually the same weight going from 12 to 20 reps, but maintaining the RP around like 6.5. I don't remember how much I said, like 5.5 to 6, but basically having the same RP in both scenario. And this is one argument why training to failure is a good thing. It's because, you know, it's like dead certain. If you cannot move the weight up with very good execution, then you know that it was an RP10, and the next time that you go to the gym and redo your set with the same execution that's standardized and same effort where you land to an RP10, if in that case you've increased the weight or you were able to perform more reps than before, then you know that your last training was effective, but you also know that you're applying progressive overload because you are pushing your limits further than where they were before.
And so RPE is another skill that you will need to like develop, experience how it feels like to train at different RPEs for different exercises, because again that will feel different. An RPE 10 on a leg extension feels different than on a back squat, right? Or for a lateral raise. So what I would love to just point out on a like side note is that this is also the main reason why I'm always saying, if you want to transform your body, you need to develop the love for the gym and for lifting and training and understanding what you're doing. If you're just chasing the physique and just chasing the aesthetics, which will come, right? If you're developing those skills, you will definitely transform your body. Like if you're not eating McDonald's every day, right? But you need to develop that love for performance and being in the gym. And I just remember like yesterday we had some one-on-one client onboarding calls, and the question was like, do you have any specific performance goals? And they don't have that yet because they want body transformation. So we will go with them through different phases. But we as coaches already know, like at some point we want to set and we need to set some performance goals to strive for. And it's not that you have to become an Olympic weightlifter or power lifter, like using the heaviest weight on everything. We can also set a goal of like a 10 rep max or a 5 rep max or whatever it is. Or also if it's like not numbers related, then learning a couple of those things like, hey, how can how can we integrate a paused movement in a squat so that you're learning like how to control that very hard part of a squat where you're in the bottom position, or some training methods that you want to maybe experience and see how that feels on your body. And so I think training, lifting, being in the gym, and that like whole performance thing is so important if you want to transform your body and have fun doing it. Because if you're constantly just chasing the aesthetics and the physique, it's nice. And as I said, you will get there at some point when you're putting in the work in the gym and really becoming good at what you're doing there. but also it takes time. And so if you don't enjoy the gym and you don't care about a squat or an RDL, or how to improve your hip hinge, or how to become better in your lat pull downs, or whatever it is, then it's going to be a pretty grindy journey. And eventually you will be just like, you know what am I actually doing here?
Yeah, we don't want that. And so talking about love, if so far you've had like a few light bulb moments, or you're like, pretty cool take, pretty interesting perspective, then show some love for the podcast, subscribe, like it. This is immensely helpful. And so I just want to go on with what you were saying. The bodybuilders who are the masters at growing muscles and getting lean, they are playing the game of like the physique improvement. They are obsessed with trying to beat the training log, right? So they write down their performance, their workouts, and then the next time they go into the gym, they are pretty driven and trying to beat what they did last time. It's not only about like mind muscle connection, that sort of things, but most of them who are very successful, they are very driven by that sort of things. And so this is important because it does have an impact on your mindset. It kind of pulls you slightly away from the physique thing, but it's also a very good way to have a frame of reference that tells you whether you are making progress or not, and whether you are building muscle or not. Because the truth is, it's not super easy to measure actual muscle growth. And people say like a DEXA scan is the best way to do that, but even a DEXA has some inaccuracies. It depends on the algorithm that's put in the machine, how the machine is set up by the technician. But also the DEXA scan is not only measuring your muscle mass, but the whole of your lean mass. It means that it's also about your organs, your bones, glycogen stores in your muscle,
Water.
and your liver, water content, and that sort of things. And so it's not super easy to measure muscle mass. But what's very, very strongly indicating that you have a lot of muscle, or that you are growing muscle, is how much force you can produce, right? And so the reason why that is because the muscle fibers that tend to grow most are the fast twitch muscle fibers, and those are the ones that produce the most force. And if you can grow them, then you are going to be able to produce more force, and if you can produce more force, then you are going to be able to move more weight in the gym. And so this is something that should happen fairly frequently. As we said, at some point, like when you start, at the beginning you can add some weight like pretty much every week, but at some point you're not going to be able to do that. And so a good rate of progress over the course of a year would be 20 kilo added to your lower body lifts, the big ones, and then half of that for your upper body lift. We are talking like very good results if you can have full-on consistency for pretty much the full year, and no injury, and no like niggles or trouble with consistency. So in pounds, that would be 45 to 50 pounds, and like 20 to 25 pounds for the upper body. If you can maintain that, you are doing like great. If you can repeat that for a few years, then you are for sure going to transform your body. But the thing is, and this is the last thing I have to say about training to failure or not training to failure, is again, training to failure is not a guarantee, because building muscle is not only about creating mechanical tension. It's also about accumulating enough volume so that your body has a reason to adapt. And the problem is, once you've done a workout a few times, then your body has adapted to that, and the stimulus is not going to be there to further trigger growth. And one example I always like to give is with walking and running. You can increase your step counts from 10,000 to 15,000 to 20,000 or whatever, if you just increase the number of steps that you are doing, you are not going to get a faster runner. If you want to get a faster runner, then it means that you have to run and progressively increase the speed of running. And so when it comes to your strength training, it's the same. Once you've done a workout a few times, then this workout is not going to further trigger adaptation in your body. And so let's say that you go to the leg extension and you do 3 times 12 to 15, and you are using like 50 kilo, and you do that 15 reps 3 times, and you do that like once a week. Then if you just keep repeating that over and over and over again, then you're not going to further progress. And it doesn't matter if this is like training to failure for you, if it's not enough volume in total, because maybe you do that workout only once a week, or because you are not really putting in enough work so that the next time you get into the gym, you are able to progress in some way, at least like once a month, then it means that the training to failure is actually not producing the growth that you are expecting. Because as I said before, progressive overload is both like the mechanism, but also the proof that what you are doing is working in the gym. And so if you are not able to apply progressive overload over, a certain amount of time, then it means that your training is not really stimulative and effective enough. And this is where you have to think about what variable of training is holding you back. If you've been training to failure the whole time, yet you are still not able to make further progress, then it means that it's not the intensity that's holding you back, and it's not like training more to failure or going beyond failure, because there are some people who do that. It's not what's going to really help you do that. What's missing is something else. And if you've done the execution correctly and you've layered in the intensity, then the next thing that's going to matter quite a lot is the volume.
100%. And I also like you just said that, and I had an idea of how to translate that a little bit to nutrition as well, because one thing that I see happening all the time is women think because they're consistently going to the gym, they're very consistent with their gym routine. Check, like that's what's needed. Like, what else? If this is already dialed in, then the only thing that I need to figure out now is the nutrition part, right? So often I hear this like, hey, I think like training, I'm going to the gym 3, 4, or 5 times a week. Maybe I'm doing even some cardio, and I'm consistent with that for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. And because my body didn't change, it has to be my nutrition. But you would not say just because you're eating every day and you're consistent with eating every day, that's why your body should transform and the training is the problem, right? So it's very interesting. And what I see with the women that we work with, it's most of the time they come to us, it's exactly that. They're consistent with their lifting. They don't think that's the issue. It's the nutrition, right? They can't seem to figure out how much, what, and when to eat, and they're confused and all those things. But the nutrition piece is the one piece that we figure out the fastest. And I'm not saying now like specifically going through the different body transformation phases. That's another layer, another topic. But like overall nutrition structure, like what should you eat? How much should you eat to maintain? And when should you eat? Like this, we will figure this out in like 2 to 4 weeks in most cases. And then you have your nutrition structure set. And I mean the same with like bodybuilders. They are not spending, they have their nutrition structure. Like once it's built out, it's built out. Then of course you can tweak things here and there based on the phase that you're in. If it's the amount of the stuff that you're eating, or you're swapping foods because you're in different phases. But you kind of, you have your structure laid out. And then it's basically everything is about training. Training is like, it becomes so much more important. And the women who are getting more and more advanced working with us, they're going through the same experience. Like at some point there's like this oh, nutrition is like the easy part, right? Nutrition is, I figured that out. I'm eating the same meals, like I have the same routine. It's the same food choices that I just like to eat and that are convenient for me to prep, whatever it is. But then the whole training thing becomes such a bigger part of their journey and interest and skill development and all those things. And so I think for me, this is something that I've seen inside the Strong Babes Club with one-on-one clients. Like all the ladies that we work with, they have that realization moment of, oh, okay, I have the biggest chunk to learn when it comes to my training, actually.
Yeah, and just to close that loop or that train of thought, you could. The nutrition is not what's going to drive the body transformation. And that might sound a little controversial or surprising when you hear that, but if you were to eat exactly the same thing as you do right now, like copy paste every week, literally exactly the same, and double the amount of steps that you're doing, you are going to lose some body fat. And it's pretty much like a guarantee because your energy expenditure is going to be much higher. And if you control and maintain exactly the same food intake, then you're going to see some changes in body composition just by doing that. But the nutrition is only there to really support the transformation that you drive with the training. And the women we work with and that talk to us are the women who say like, I'm consistent, and now they are saying like, I'm consistent going to the gym, I apply progressive overload, I train close to failure.
Exactly.
Those are women who want to have the muscle definition that you see on social media, who want to have the next level physique, who are ambitious. This is the kind of transformation that you can only achieve with the training. Eating enough protein alone is not going to trigger any significant increase in muscle mass. It's really just there to support the recovery from the training. What's going to really drive the changes that you want to have in order to have that body is really the way that you are working out day in, day out, week in, week out, over a long period of time. So we are not talking about like 12 months, but more like 10 times that, a decade. And this is something that's sometimes also very hard to grasp for people. It's like, oh, I've heard that I have to apply progressive overload and that I need to train close to failure. And it's like, that's great that you do that you develop those skills. If you do that for 3 months, then you are going to make some progress, but it's not going to make a huge difference yet. And so you have to continue doing this for a long period of time. And this is where it becomes challenging with the training because, as I said, the body adapts to what you're doing. And so you need a new kind of stimulus. And also, if you constantly push yourself to train to failure, you are going to be very, very fatigued because the fatigue from the set increases exponentially. So the closer you are to failure, the more fatigue you are going to create. And so if this is what you do, your training plan has to also be set slightly differently because you have to account for the amount of fatigue that comes from training to failure. And what we see very often is, training plans that are designed for people who train like with an RP7, maybe 8, but then they take every set to failure. And after a few weeks or a few months of doing this, then either there's too much fatigue or there's too much hunger because this is going to create more energy demand, or there are some niggles happening, or there's maybe some sleep disruption. And so this is really to close the discussion of do you have to train to failure or not to create muscle growth. The single most important thing that you can do to create muscle is to train consistently over a long period of time while making progress doing so. And training to failure is only like another tool in your toolbox that's going to help achieve that, but it can very well hold you back, especially if you're like a high achiever, ambitious woman who really, really wants to build those muscle. And if you just push all the time, it's the only thing that you do, then most likely the training to failure thing is going to actually hold you back, and it's not going to long-term help you achieve as much muscle growth as you could.
That was an amazing closing the loop, closing the discussion for today. Thank you for listening. Again, if you know someone who would benefit from this episode, send the link over. We want to reach as many women as we can and educate them on strength training, nutrition, and body transformation strategy. So thank you for listening, and until next time.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.